So Balázs is from EVIA, the Institute of Information Law. And what I just wanted to say is that the EVIA, in my view, is really the leading institute on information law in Europe. In 2018, Balázs received an ERC starting grant to study the legal and political implications of blockchain technologies. Now, blockchain technology is already quite obviously related to the issue of trust. You could possibly speak of a trust technology here. And I also therefore find it quite logical that your research interest has somewhat shifted to trust as a social phenomenon. And I would like to highlight 3 of your recent publications here, which show this interest. One is maintaining trust in a technologized public sector. It appears to have some relationship to our democracy area, possibly. Then the commodification of trust, which was highly influential on the setup of a workshop, which I did on trust and platform regulation earlier this year. And the third one is mediated trust, a theoretical framework to address the trustworthiness of technological trust mediators. Quite often trust shows up, but it's not only quantity, I think it's also quality. And the fruit of all this research is the newly established research priority area at the University of Amsterdam called Trust in the Digital Society. So it's not yet on the website of the University of Amsterdam because it only starts next year, but it was awarded earlier this year. And this research priority area is led by Balázs, who is the director of this large project. In his talk, he will lay out, as far as I understand, the research questions and perspectives pursued in this project, which will, I'm sure, be really interesting to us here at ConTrust. We're just about to drawing up a project description for what we want to do. And ideally, and that would be the optimal outcome of tonight, your talk will be a starting point for an ongoing exchange between Frankfurt and Amsterdam on the issues of trust, conflict, and technology. And with that, I hand over the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alexander, for the kind words and also for the repeated invitation. I had a really nice time last time I was here. And I am greatly honored by being part of this speaker series. I've listened to many of the talks given here, and I'm a little bit afraid because there are really big shoes to fill. I would like to talk here about 3 topics. One is, and the apropos for that is, as Professor Perkert has already mentioned, is this launch of a new interdisciplinary research program at the University of Amsterdam, which looks at trust in the digital society. And when we were setting up the international advisory board of that project, we invited Alexander. Also because ConTrust is one of the European major initiatives on trust research, and I believe that in the next 5 years the relevance of this topic will just only grow. And I think we are we are very well positioned at this stage to actually think something that points beyond our respective institutions and think how we can pool our knowledge and expertise and experiences and research into something larger European on trust, the changing dynamics of trusting in the digital society. So one of the topics that I would like to address today is this new initiative. The second is the actual framework which we're going to be working on. And the third one, maybe if I have enough time, to give you some insights about the first steps in terms of empirical research of how we address these questions in the concrete. And as Alexander has already said, this topic grew out of a different research. The ERC project on blockchain had this starting point of that maybe blockchain technologists are not giving always the right answers, but they're certainly asking interesting questions. And one of the questions that they asked, in my view, is like, can we build trust solely through technology, solely through encryption, solely through automated enforcement of rules. And that is an interesting question. Maybe not so much if you focus on whether blockchain systems are trustworthy, but rather in a wider perspective, asking, well, if this is how technologists, libertarian technologists think about trust, then maybe we can see how this approach fits into the larger ways, societal logics of trust production. If blockchains are one proposal to produce trust in the digital society, are there others, and how they are faring compared to each other? And this has led me to this approach of looking into the political economy of trust in the digital society. Trust research usually focuses on the individual and the individual's attitudes, trusting attitudes, what explains my trust in someone else. This is not my approach, though it has part in the larger trust research project that we are doing. My interest lies in the larger macroeconomic or societal logics, infrastructures, ways to actually create trust within society among various social groups or among individuals, and what kind of infrastructures, what kind of systems actually aiding this transformation process. This requires an idiosyncratic definition of trust, and I'm an economist by training, so sometimes I feel free or empowered to put on my economist hat, which is a very strange hat otherwise, and just define things as a resource, because economists can define anything as a resource. And so I use this liberty of mine to define trust as a resource, which means that this is something, some form of knowledge or some form of energy that we tap into when we have to cooperate or maybe just simply coexist with a stranger, and there is a substantial distance that divides us. Distance in terms of culture, distance in terms of language, distance in terms of socioeconomic status, distance in geography. So this is something which then can be produced. If something is a resource, then you can certainly produce it, right? Or at least exploit it or mine it or appropriate it. So then the question is, how do we produce trust in society? And then we had this brief talk with Alexander before, he mentioned that the ConTrust project has a research thread on epistemic certainty or epistemic frameworks. One way to produce trust is actually create a shared epistemic framework, which produces some form of familiarity. And I'm a Hungarian by birth. My son goes to a Dutch school. Within that Dutch school, there is a Moroccan kid, there is a Turkish kid, there is a Hungarian kid, there is a Dutch kid, but they are sitting in the same Dutch school. And the Dutch public education is an epistemic framework creating machinery which allows these very different sociocultural background kids to actually trust each other and be a member of a society in which those members trust each other. So familiarity there is important. And then when it comes to public service media or when it comes to reliable news, these are all these mechanisms with which we can build a more trusting society. The second approach, and we are in the normative Ordnungen building, is providing control within trust relationships, whether that's a contract or whether that's a smart contract, which limits the trustee to harm me, actually helps me to trust that person and remove some of the risks and uncertainties. The third is insurance. That's the market where you can actually make sure that whatever harms may come from relying on a stranger is mitigated. And as the Polish sociologist Piotr Somka said, modern societies, the democratic order, the public institutions are actually outsourcing distrust. That we have built an institutional order where we trust institutions to distrust, so we don't have to. Now, if these are the prerequisites of trust, then we can ask, okay, so what kind of frameworks are we using? What are the frameworks in which all these prerequisites are built into trust relations, right? If we look at this in like large scale systemic frameworks, then we can distinguish three different logics or three different infrastructures of trust production. One is the communal. This is the most ancient. It relies on peer connections. It relies on the tribe. It relies on the profession. It relies on interpersonal networks. It's a framework where group produces trust for the members of the group. And this is on which like ancient trade networks have rested before any other more systemic safeguard in trade, the Silk Road based on such communal trust networks. The second is the public trust infrastructure. This emerged with the emergence of the modern state, where the modern state, the king needed to build trust among different communal frameworks and bridge them within the framework of, within the boundaries of the state. This is quite clear. Trust here is produced as a public service financed by taxes. And the institutional form it takes is the school, is the public service media, is the courts, is the fair, transparent public administration. So that is the framework which allows people from Friesland to North Brabant, or from here from Hamburg to Munich, to trust each other, despite the fact that they belong to very different local, maybe religious, maybe historic traditions. And last but not least, trust is often a product which you can buy. And if you go to a lawyer, or if you go to a brand, or if you go to an accountant, or if you go to the mafia, then you're paying for some trust being sold to you. This is a really large business. There you buy it as a commodity. Sorry. I'm getting closer to the end of the introduction. What is interesting is that in the last 10 to 20 years, we have seen, we could observe the emergence of a new form of private trust production. So apart on, or aside, or on top of brands, on top of lawyers, law firms, on top of traditional trust professions, we see technology companies entering into the production of trust and the commercialization of trust. How do they work? So what we see are three logics of technological trust production. They share some aspects, but they are very different in how they operate. What they share is that they all operate on a planetary scale, right? They are all algorithmic one way or another. Some kind of an automated system is in their heart. They are very lightly regulated. The European framework is just now emerging, but in the US, regulation is very patchy. They are all private companies, and we see with Twitter now, right, what's happening when something is truly private. They are very much disembedded from all those previous trust production frameworks that I just mentioned, whether these are interpersonal or whether these are public. They are not part of these institutional frameworks. You do not know where Twitter moderators sit. They do not know how they work. You cannot just bump them into in a local bar as you can bump into your newspaper editor. And their trustworthiness is maybe in question. But before I go to the trustworthiness question, let me just quickly run through three different logics of technological trust production. On the first hand, we see these planetary scale private reputation management systems. Uber, Airbnb, the Amazon Marketplace, or eBay, they keep a track of you and they assign like 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1 stars. This is your trustworthiness score. This is what you are doing. And this is what we are relying on as customers to make sure that the person or counterparty that we are engaging with through these systems will not rape us, will not kidnap us, will not sell us something funny, and so on, right? They charge quite a lot for these services. So if you look at how much Uber charges or how much Airbnb charges for one transaction in their trustworthy system, it can be pretty close to 20% of all the transaction value. That's quite a lot, right? What they create is a shared epistemic framework, right? Where we think we navigate the same signals of trustworthiness. The second is where this whole research started out from. This is the blockchain systems, where they create trust through some control of the present. They limit my ability to cheat you. It limits your ability to cheat me. So we can, as two anonymous strangers, can transfer value on a planetary scale. That's great, but that's only possible because the system itself limits our ability to breach the trust, right? I think there are more and more of these governance by technology approaches as we move slowly into the future. These are all the systems which then will prevent us to speed, will prevent us on the highways, will prevent us to post copyright infringing content on platforms or insult each other delightfully through communication. Right. The third approach to technological trust production is somehow the control of the future. If the traditional approach to defining trust, or the traditional definition of trust, is the reduction of future uncertainty. Right. We reduce uncertainty in the future and focus on the positive outcomes. This is exactly what AI systems are striving to do. They are trying to reduce uncertainty regarding the future choices of what news might interest you, what kind of music might be to your taste, by filtering out the irrelevant or the harmful or the uninteresting things, and providing some kind of a positive expectations of, hey, this will meet who you are or who you think you are, right? So control of the past, the present, of the future, three ways to produce trust with technology. Well, the question, what we need to ask now at this stage, where we, on the one hand, already rely on these systems to quite a lot, right? We consume a significant amount of our news or information through platforms. We spend a significant amount of money through these e-commerce systems. We already are embedded our lives in one way or another at the mercy of these systems, is whether they are trustworthy, whether we can trust them to produce trust in social relations. And that's a key question, because I grew up in Hungary. I remember I was 15 when the wall came down. I remember my parents talking on the phone and saying to each other, let's discuss this in person. This is not for the phone. Right? And they also, my father was a journalist, he was writing newspapers in that era. People were reading newspapers in the era, but that doesn't mean that they trusted what was written in the Pravda, if you like. So people can use untrustworthy infrastructures, but it makes quite a difference of how you use them, whether you know if that infrastructure is untrustworthy, and then how you adjust to this fact in the first place. And if you live in an authoritarian regime and you assume that your phone is not tapped, and it is, then it can cost your life. If you are reading news from the Pravda or from Twitter or from anywhere other source as if it was trustworthy while it is not, then it can cost you your democracy. So the question is whether we can trust these infrastructures to build trust. And my argument in the mediated trust paper is that these we have no reason to trust these infrastructures. We have zero way to actually verify their trustworthiness, because they are black box algorithms, because our experience with them is super fragmented, right? And at the worst case, we can safely assume that they are not trustworthy at all. Why? Because we have ample evidence that they are not acting in our best interest, right? And that is one of the key definitions of trustworthiness, that the trustee is actually acting in your interest rather than his or theirs, right? So there are immense information and power asymmetries which are being exploited against the users of these technological systems. And it's just icing on the cake, the fact that these are planetary scale systems which want to do business in the US, in the Europe, in China, in authoritarian regimes as much in democracies. And how can you maintain some kind of an integrity if you want to do business with all kinds of strange people across the globe? So, and then like people pulling out from Russia voluntarily, firms are pulling out from Russia. This is the integrity question in play. Okay, so that's the introduction part. This is where we are living. We are embedded in these systems, private technological systems, to trust each other. These systems are not very trustworthy. What now? One of the theoretical interests in this question is like, what happens when we commodify a resource, right? And I would like to invoke here Karl Polanyi, whose term I'm using here. And what he warned us earlier is that commodification takes place when a resource, which was first governed by the community itself, and it was under the values, under the power of the people who that resource served or who pool that resource. What happens to this community when the resource is being governed by the market forces, right? And this is exactly what we are talking about here, is the trust, which was an interpersonal thing, or which was a thing produced by our government through, or which we control through our representatives of political processes and through our institutions, is suddenly produced by Elon Musk, right? What can go wrong, right? And whoever is on Twitter has an answer for that. There are signs, right, that we can with which we can answer this question. One is that we start to pay attention to not the trustworthiness signals of the other, but the trustworthiness signals produced by the system. That's a form of cognitive disembeddedness. And the most straightforward example here would be a dating app, right? If you're swiping and you're looking at whatever your dating app is showing about the person, and ask yourself, is this a right representation of a person that I'm actually about to decide whether I let into my body or not? Then you see how much the distance can be in terms of an interpersonal trust relation and a mediated trust signal, which the system fiddles with, adjusts, and defines based on their economic interest. The second is that it's disembedded from our cultural framework. Like Airbnb is very proud that proudly says that it's present in like 120,000 different locations, right? How can you be present equally in 120,000 different locations from Kazakhstan via Amsterdam to South America if you are taking into account all the cultural differences and idiosyncrasies of you cannot, right? You have to be blind for the cultural differences unless you risk alienating some or all of your users. And that is the culture wars on social media. Again, the example is very clear. If you start to somehow filter who can speak or who cannot based on political values or on any other like value decisions, then you suddenly split your community. And that is the tragedy of Twitter again and again and again, that they try to maintain some kind of an integrity, some kind of adherence to certain values, but that splinters their business case. Not all platforms are willing to make that choice. And finally, they are very weakly regulated. They are not interfacing with any of the governance frameworks there. So they are foreign, they are elsewhere, they are unaccountable. Why is it important? It's important both from an individual and a societal perspective. The individual perspective means that your individual's wealth, well-being, success is actually dependent on whether you do labor in these systems, right? And if you fall out because you are unable to comply or unwilling to pay, or you somehow fall victim to some administrative error, then you lose your trustworthiness info, right? Then you lose your ability to engage in those social or economic transactions which were based on trust. The social consequences is that some of these private trust infrastructures have in their DNA the will and also more and more the power to disrupt existing trust relationship. This is the Silicon Valley ideology. Let's disrupt, right? Let's break things. And what they are doing is actually breaking things. And one of the things they are breaking is the trust relationship that we have built up through millennia, right? That's one thing. The second thing is that they are actually trying to replace them. They are trying to step into the role of one of these. When the blockchain enthusiasts or delusionists think that they can build state upon a decentralized infrastructure, they are trying to actively replace the public trust infrastructure with a private one. But then we have to ask ourselves, when they are replacing it, is this an efficiency move? As the Americans would argue, it's like, why would we worry about that? It's great. It's like we get something better instead. But maybe not, because when we are investing time and energy into the upkeep of like the schools and the public service media and the good public administration and friendships and socialities, then we are actually building society or maintaining society and something that is common instead of relying on something that is private So what is to be done? I brought up this research project, which luckily seems to be funded by the University of Amsterdam, to actually try to navigate how these dynamics take place in the digital society. Because it's very clear that the rise of these private technological trust infrastructures and the shifts in how and when and why not people trust their government and how they trust each other are closely interlinked. One cannot understand one without taking into the account in the other. So we have to somehow think about trust or trust dynamics in the digital society in a systemic perspective and from an interdisciplinary perspective. And what I see now is that there is lots of questions around trust, but it's trust in use or trust in AI, or whether we can use the AI Act to build more trustworthy technology. So these are very much siloed approaches being placed in different disciplines and different departments, but they are not really connected. So we started this 5-year collaboration. We're going to start this 5-year collaboration between law, humanities, social sciences, and computer science, and economics, and define 4 projects for ourselves. All projects are a collaboration between 2 of these disciplines. The first one is about trust towards technology. What kind of legal, technological, economic conditions are necessary to have these trust infrastructures trustworthy? The second is what kind of trust develops through these digital infrastructures when it comes to communication, when it comes to news consumption, when it comes to social, political, cultural exchange. The third is what kind of role media has in institutionalized distrust, how conspiracy theories, fake news, different epistemic frameworks offered or circulating on social media are rearranging our trust relationships. And the last is how courts, governments, and legislators can address these issues, and where they are falling victim to the trust dynamics. And very quickly, how much time I have? I'm gonna have 5 minutes more, and then we can do a Q&A. I would like to get to the third point of tonight. That is an empirical study that we are doing within this framework, trying to measure, using an example, a case study, to actually test this framework in practice. So this is our theoretical model. When I built this on the train, I had this regression into my childhood playing with wooden blocks. But this is a simplified version of what I just explained to you. So we are trying to understand what makes people trust more or trust less in a technical system. In this case, it's going to be a platform, Facebook, because this is what we expect all of our respondents to know best. But we are not just interested in the trust in the platform, but we are interested in how the trust in the platform actually interacts with both the users encountered through the platform and the information encountered through the platform. So how does trust on the platform works and how it's affected by trust in the platform, right? Okay, so these are our, on the top, the little triangles are our dependent variables. This is what we are measuring. And our theory suggests that this trust in the platform rests on 3 pillars. One pillar is trust in self. I can trust the platform, I can trust platform information, I can trust the other users, because somehow I am able to recognize the threats, and I'm also somehow able to protect myself from this threat. So I'm able to actually see you are trying to scam me, and I'm able to mute you. I'm able to somehow measure, are you going to be a reliable seller or not, and then I'm able to report you or not engage with you. So if I have my own powers to navigate this, then I have high thoughts about it, then I'm gonna be more willing to actually engage through the platform. That's pillar 1. Pillar 2 is I trust in the platform to actually protect me. I trust in their moderation capacities. I trust in their algorithms. I trust in their goodwill to actually protect me from all the harms that can be there, from scammers, from Russian propaganda, from misinformation, from untrustworthy users. And the last is that even if I don't trust much myself, even if I don't trust Facebook, because why would I, then I can still trust the EU or still can trust my national government to make good laws and make sure that these systems are accountable. At the same way, they regulate the food industry, they regulate the schools, they regulate the media. They also somehow make sure that all these systems that we rely on are reliable. So everything rests on some generalized trust. And so what we are trying to understand is like which pillar is the thickest, which bears the most load, and whether if one is weaker, the others are being able to take over the load. So if I feel, hey, I don't really navigate this whole digital jungle very well, will those people trust more the government to actually defend them? Or those people who do not trust Meta to protect them, do they beef up or do they go to the state for protection? We did a survey. It's a cross-country survey. We worked in the Netherlands, Germany, Greece, Portugal, Hungary, Estonia, and France. And we asked 1,000 people in every country. So we have 7,000 respondents. They are representative of education, age, and socioeconomic status. And these are our early findings. We are writing up the paper now. So what we see is that there is a very nuanced distrust in platforms. And this distrust is very not very uniform across different countries, but also across different questions. And I'm going to show you that. It's a horrible image, very information dense. But what you can see here is all the different bars are different countries. Germany is on the top, it's a pink in every like thick line. So this is Germany, for example. The 3 columns are the 3 meta properties. So this is Facebook, this is Instagram, and this is WhatsApp. And these are the different trust dimensions. So the trust in platform, WhatsApp is the most trusted in different countries. Facebook is the least trusted, but not equally not trusted. Instagram depends. This is distrust in users or user misrepresentation. And then you can see that Facebook is seen as a place where users misrepresent themselves, Insta even more, WhatsApp not at all. But that, again, varies country by country because country differences matter. So we must not speak about trust as if it was a culture independent or homogeneous resource. It very much depends on not just country, not just situation, but also depends on the digital infrastructure that we're looking at. What we also see that users have a very different and also culturally very grounded expectations who's gonna protect them. We ask them, who should regulate Facebook? And what you see here is that, for example, France and also in, France is the strongest. They have a very strong expectations of both the national government and the EU to protect themselves, protect users. In Estonia, there's very little expectations vis-a-vis the state to regulate Facebook. Facebook is expected to regulate Facebook. So users have a very strong expectations that platforms will behave well. And for example, NGOs or the wider civil sector plays apparently very little role in this mess. Interestingly, Hungary, I'm very sad to see this, are not expecting the government to actually regulate Facebook, and they've tried to avoid it. This is maybe a left-leaning bias in our sector. And what our models show is that sadly, a user seems to be stand naked in the storm, which means that when we ask, like, okay, so how do you trust? What do you trust? Then we see that if the risk perception is, or the risks, knowledge about the online risks is higher, then they trust the platforms less. This is obvious, right? If they see the risks, they trust less the platform. If they are more trusting people, then they trust the platforms also well. This is nothing new here, right? And now come the three pillars. So when we asked about individual agency, what we saw is that, hey, my ability to recognize risks has no bearing on whether I trust the platform or not. So that has no significant effect. My ability to actually recognize threats, recognize harms, has no effect on the trust in platform. If I feel I can protect myself more, then I will trust the platform more, right? If I think I go into this storm well armed, then I'm gonna be more willing to go into the storm in the first place. The problem is that when we ask, do you know about the scandals around Facebook? Do you know about the buttons that you can use to report content? Do you filter your stream? Then the answers are consistently no, no, no. So people think they can protect themselves when they ask them whether you use the tools to protect yourself, they say no. Whether you are aware of the risks, the answer is no. So people think it's like the teenager who goes to the highway with a fresh driving license and goes 200 kilometers per hour without a seatbelt. This is how I understand it. I'm in control, but when you ask how much experience you have and whether you have your seatbelt on, the answer is no. So that's a problem. The second is that they are expecting a lot from the platform self-regulation. So this was the most important. This pillar is the thickest. The more people trust the platform to self-regulate, the impact on that, on the trust in the platform, is ginormous. But we know, again, that on the one hand, they are unaware of all the scandals on Facebook, and we also know objectively that Facebook is not to be trusted. So again, they are putting their faith into someone who's going to protect, that something going to protect them, who's actively undermining their best interest. And the most sad, the saddest for myself and my colleagues in the EVA is that they don't expect the government to actually step in and regulate. That has zero effect. Neither the national government nor the EU, despite the fact that the EU has just put out all these regulations. And what is even more worrisome is that we found no substitution effect. So we didn't see what we were expecting to see, that people who feel uncertain about their own capacities to protect themselves will look at the state. They don't. So with this very sad thing, and this is These are the early findings of that research. Let me close this talk, and thank you for your keen attention, and let's discuss how we can work together between Frankfurt and Amsterdam, because I trust that we have many things in common. Thank you.